You are about to take part in a time-traveling road trip through pop culture. A road trip with a clear destination and many stops along the way. This is but one act of one chapter of the serialized journey.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Shine your love, shusha.
When we last left off, we headed toward the end of our long odyssey into MST3K's 6th season with some sexy-ass refueling. We mourned the career of Louis Gossett Jr., checked Anne Margaret for ticks, and explored the darker side of lady wrestling. This week, we'll discuss all the fun you can have with unfettered despair, return to the Quinn Martin well with a very special Fugitive, and break down what happens when you turn a stack of Penthouse magazines into an action movie. As always, I am Ryan Rodriguez, and you were stuck with the Coolness Chronicles Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Episode
Chapter 9, Top of the Basic Cable Mountain. Act 7, Shine Your Love. Have you ever seen a movie so overwhelmingly miserable that you couldn't take it? Something so devoid of flair or joy it fucks with you on a primal level? A movie that isn't about depression but is instead the embodiment of depression? Something that lasts only 69 minutes but packs as many kicks to the gut as a 5-hour Bergman film? Like The Girl in Lover's Lane had an unholy love child with Red Zone Cuba? I present to you Experiment 618, 1959's High School Big Shot.
What's the idea of trying to make a fool out of me in there?
I don't understand what you mean. That's...
Oh, can't. Now, you know what I mean.
What chance has a little guy with brains against the husky high school football hero? What chance has he to be the high school big shot?
The world's full of guys like him. You're kind of special. Well, look, I'm serious.
In every high school, you'll find a girl like this, who's been around enough to know how to get around any man she wants. Teasing, tantalizing this brute of a boy into man-killing violence.
$1 million in untraceable, unmarked, probably highly ill-gotten cash.
This is the loot that leads to explosive excitement. The high school hero taking his high school huskies into fighting action against the brain. The kid who showed the big time how.
A little homework on this torch song to seething resentment provides a red flag or two. It stars Tom Pittman, a young man who booked dozens of minor film roles and television guest spots in a career only spanning 2 years, from 1956 to 1958, when he died in a car accident. High School Big Shot was released posthumously, a whole year after Pittman's death, and when you're aware of this tragedy before watching the episode, God help you if you don't feel just a twitch uncomfortable, especially considering all the ugly jokes they sling in his direction, which always makes me, a man who isn't terribly fond of his own looks, a little bummed.
His lips.
What difference does it make?
He has a haunting ugliness.
You didn't know him?
In telling you this right off the bat, I am just further proving how little I've learned over the past year about compelling podcasting. Despite this cloud of sadness hanging over the production, I personally love this episode, but for a very specific reason. It forces the Satellite of Love gang to reach deep into the dark recesses of their souls to enhance the misery surrounding them. But the first half hour of the episode is kind of a sneak attack. I'll elaborate. The first host segment centers around a chemistry set that creates an ankle-biting dinosaur in Deep 13 and a supersized mega servo on the SOL, and a truly mean riff of a baffling short called Out of This World, both of which we'll discuss in the epilogue to Chapter 9 in about 2 weeks. It's a goofy concoction that gets sharper and darker as it goes, but it's all splashed in garish, oversaturated color and couched in a silly premise involving angels and devils and assorted puffball bullshit. After the second host segment, parodying the short, the movie begins and immediately sets the tone for the next hour, gray both visually and emotionally. The very first shot is of Marv, played by Pittman, our titular big shot in high school, in front of a nondescript background running down the details of an approaching heist with no context whatsoever. It's brief, and we're into the opening credits in no time, but there's a stark flatness to it that will become the status quo in just a few minutes. The credits provide us with one of my favorite MST3K staples, Kevin Murphy's servo singing made-up lyrics to a jazzy main theme, and this one does not disappoint.
The high school big shot, a real high school big shot.
They open with such strong imagery.
He's a high school big shot. He's a big shot in high school.
Big shot, big shot, big shot, big shot, big shot, big shot.
So the big shot's in band. Big deal.
Give some of them horns. Yeah, come on.
Jack,
A monkey's gonna come in and start throwing that suitcase around.
Goes to class, ladies, a big shot. Yes, a big shot. He skips PE because he's a big shot. Some big old big shot. Hey. Wow.
Then, right back into the static bummer of the feature presentation. Marv is the smart guy at school, empathetic but wounded, socially awkward, and overly eager to please. We'll learn why momentarily. The pretty girl in his class, Betty, notices all of these qualities and starts to manipulate him into writing an essay for her so that she can go to college and escape the clutches of her presumably abusive father. It's never clear exactly how much of what Betty says is genuine or part of this damsel in distress illusion that she uses to inflict emotional terrorism on Marv. But he falls for it instantly. She is the pretty girl in class, after all, and soon they're quote-unquote dating, in that she leads him on and he dotes on her like a lovesick puppy, and she plays femme fatale on the side with her real boyfriend, a meathead named Vince with the dull disposition of a man-child who spends time after school strung out on heroin.
Why did you kiss him?
Kiss him?
You can't miss his lips. They just ran into me.
You call that a kiss?
I think so. Do I have the wrong word again?
Isn't teen love inspiring? At home, the decoration of which could generously be called sparse, Marv stresses out about being broke and trying to impress his dream girl on their date, and we're introduced to his delightful dad, who spends the entire movie a slave to the sauce and laying around the house talking about his supposed girlfriend, promising to get a job and systematically breaking his son's self-respect.
Hey, how come you're getting all dressed up? I got a date tonight. Real sharp girl I met down Tony's. Well, I've got a date tonight, too. You do? Mm-hmm. Well, who with?
Betty Alexander?
No, really, who?
Hey, she's the best-looking chick in the whole school, ain't she?
Sure is.
What in the world's she going out with you for?
Oh, I'm sorry, loser. I'm your son.
How's Mom, Dad?
In fact, when Marv informs his deadbeat pop that he has $5 whole to spend on Betty, dear old Dad asks to split the take so that he can treat his lady, who may or may not exist, to a night out.
Hey, don't worry, boy. I'll hang on to this one. No more booze for me, I promise.
Is beer booze?
Pretty soon we'll have money enough to get out of this dump. You can quit that crummy job of yours and go to college like you want.
Then we'll be married.
Like your mother wanted you to.
Before I drank her, I unscrewed her head and drank out of her neck. Well,
I know, Pop.
Thanks, kid. Have a good time tonight, huh?
You too, Pop.
$3. I'm gonna buy a French fry, Pop.
I love my life.
But even if Marv could lavish Betty with more than $2 and some change, the relationship goes quickly off the rails when Betty is called out by her English teacher for passing off Marv's paper as her own. And for his part in this duplicity, Marv loses his scholarship and therefore any chance of attending college and getting out of the four-walled hellmouth that is his domestic situation.
Where, oh where could a guy find a bell tower?
Marv is a desperate kid, and he miraculously overhears something one afternoon at his job, which just so happens to be at the docks. Fun fact, nothing good ever happens at the docks. The Wire taught me that lesson quite vividly. His boss is a drug trafficker, and he's going to have $1 million in cash kept in a safe at a very specific time. If Marv got that cash, he could win Betty back, get his father on the straight and narrow, and live a prosperous life. Actually, he couldn't. He's so mixed up that he doesn't know that, but he's blinded by love and hopelessness. Strange cocktail, those two. So he enlists the help of a world-class safecracker, or maybe country class, nope, strike that, region class, for a heist, and gives Betty the deets, hoping that she'll marry him for his efforts.
I'm stealing it.
I think.
You're what?
I'm not stealing it?
Oh, look, cut it out, will you? You haven't even got the nerve to lie.
I mean it, Betty. I'm stealing $1 million.
I'm stealing it $1 at a time from 1,000,000 places.
Look, you shouldn't joke about these things, Marv.
I'm not joking. I found out where there's going to be $1 million cash, and I've worked out a plan to steal it.
And then we're taking a chariot to Mars.
You're really serious, aren't you?
I just put my arm in pie.
You'd really do that for me?
Yes, I'm that screwed up.
Marv visits his ray of sunshine father to tell them the news of a possible life upgrade. Unfortunately, Dad lost his job, or at least stopped looking for one, and got dumped by his lady love, who, again, may not actually exist. Smiles all around.
How come you ain't out with Betty tonight?
No, she wanted to stay home tonight. Said it makes her old man happy if she stays in every once in a while.
Oh, I see.
So, want to get a porn movie?
Really think it's time we consider that suicide pact.
Marv, no, it's true. I'm a burden. If I weren't around, you could do anything you want. Live your life the way you want. Go to college.
Look, Pop, I don't want you talking like that anymore, you understand?
I mean, you're right, but...
Marv, listen,
Can you borrow me some bean money?
I want you to know one thing.
I'm your mother.
No matter what happens, I want you to know I tried to be a good father to you. Really, I tried.
Do you have any specific examples?
Before heading to the docks, Marv returns home one last time to find his father hanging from the ceiling. This is a bad omen. Not that there are any good omens to be found, but still. Marv puts on a brave face, and he, the safecracker, and their criminal associate pull off the heist with little resistance, only to encounter a gun-toting Vince while fleeing the scene. It turns out Betty told him everything because she's a no-good double-crosser. Vince shoots the third guy in Marv's trio unprovoked, and when Betty shows up at the docks, he blames her for his mistake and shoots her 5 times when one would have sufficed. Marv crumples to the ground weeping, assuming the fetal position that you are probably also in at this point as an audience member. Vince grabs a suitcase stuffed with $1 million and hauls ass, only to be shot by the drug money's rightful owners right at the edge of the docks, and every last dollar tumbles into the ocean. The cops show up, and Marv's life is figuratively over. Plus, everyone he knows is dead. Frank Conniff had this to say about High School Big Shot. Quote, "If you took all the bad things that ever happened to me in my life, filmed each incident, and then released it as a movie, you still couldn't make a movie nearly as depressing as this." End quote. I don't know if I could say the same, but I'm a downer like that. To compensate for the doldrums of the feature presentation, the MST3K crew constructed a very charming and prop-filled episode full of segments that delight and amuse. Thank God. Aside from the chemistry set scenario that we'll discuss later, there are 2 sketches in particular that I love, and they both involve the bots in my favorite mode, being little rascals. In the episode's prologue, Mike has a headache, something that the real Michael J. Nilsson copes with in real life, but he's sadly not going to get any relief from his robot pals.
Oh, a headache? Oh, yeah. Well, that's too bad, Mike. But I've got to practice my cymbals. I got a big recital tomorrow.
No. So could you not,
Hey, Mike, look what I found here. A bagpipe. Any requests?
Well, Servo, I have a headache. So
I don't know that one. How about Amazing Grace?
Well...
I just saw Seinfeld. Kramer is too much.
And in segment 4, Gypsy left her diary on the bridge of the SOL. She kept it locked, but Crow and Servo have a solution for that. Dynamite. Nevertheless, Gypsy's secrets are safe because her lock is, shall we say, sturdy.
Fire in the hole! Look at that, still locked. Any ideas, T. Hewitt?
More dynamite.
Right, more
Yes.
dynamite.
The answer is clear. Delicate application of TNT, precisely calibrated.
Right, fire in the hole.
Oh, wow, it's still locked.
You want to give it another go?
Sure, what the heck.
Okay.
Boy, I tell you, these Happy Hearts diaries are really well made.
Fire in the hole. This is really frustrating.
With each successive blast, the bots are increasingly destroyed but resilient, not unlike Daffy Duck in a Chuck Jones cartoon. It's adorable. And speaking of adorable, I've never been great with segues. Nothing is more cuddly than a weapon of mass destruction. Let's transition to Experiment 620, 1967's Danger Death Ray. The danger has 2 exclamation points, so you know they mean business.
Too bad.
What in heaven's name is going on?
We're looking for a man.
My word. Good idea. Let me know if you catch one.
Oh, darling, take care of yourself, will you?
And try to keep out of trouble.
Senorita Roberta, get back to work.
Frank! Frank! Help!
We've covered the Italian Bond ripoff subgenre in decent detail back in Chapter 7 when we discussed the Neil Connery pastiche Operation 0007, and Danger Death Ray is no exception to the rule. Unfortunately, where that movie occasionally made up for its incomprehensible plot with gonzo art design and plenty of flair, this is considerably less visually impressive, as evidenced by a scene that tries to execute the effect of a helicopter landing on a submarine using toys.
Tiny Bowl Man is doing all right for himself.
They're coming up for more baking soda.
Ah, the ocean's beautiful in this part of the tub.
Well, this set is at least 3 box tops.
Special effects by Billy.
These are not toys.
Huh?
Don't go up there. You'll become a toy.
It's not the least impressive Bond clone to be featured on the show, for that honor goes to Season 8's Agent from Harm, but it's still pretty damn bland in every department. The script is dull, the photography haphazard, the performances have no life or spirit, and the direction seems to be on autopilot. One thing that can be said for Italian ripoffs is that while they're frequently ludicrous and bold in their thievery, they can be counted on for at least one weird aspect that stands as particularly notable or diverting. If that notable aspect is the formerly catchy, presently annoying theme song, as in the case with Danger Death Ray, you're in for 90 minutes of tedium.
I can't run without my theme.
If the music speeds up a bit, I can catch her.
Quick, I need to get on the tilt-a-whirl.
Ding!
Boy, that's fun. I can't get enough of that.
Actually, I take that back conditionally. There are 2 catchy tunes in this movie, although the second sounds suspiciously like a Herbie Hancock standard.
Grow some hair. Watermelon Man.
The lack of inherent interest in anything the movie has to offer is particularly strange when considering the career of director Gianfranco Baldanello, who is primarily known for helming spaghetti westerns, a genre that is notable for its style, atmosphere, and tone, if not repetitive storytelling. He also ended his film career with an attempt to ride Spielberg's box office coattails with a sci-fi sex comedy called Very Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, that is neither here nor there, although if you know how to obtain a print, please discreetly contact me. Back on topic, Danger Death Ray begins its uninvolving premise with a scientist who designs the titular device for peaceful purposes, like most devices with the word death in the name.
It's a lot greater than a laser beam.
So I haven't just invented that again.
Gentlemen, it is my earnest wish that this instrument, which we have finally developed here, may never have to be used for anything but a purely peaceful purpose. Choice is not mine.
It's my wife's.
Open the doors.
So it's a peace-loving death ray.
A demonstration of the Death Ray's ability to make holes in metal is interrupted by a cadre of goons led by a gentleman who kind of looks like Eugene Merman if he was a part-time bodybuilder that moonlighted as an accountant. The villain acquires the Death Ray and the peace-loving scientist, and secret agent Bart Fargo, not a silly name, is assigned by his employer, MJ6, next-door neighbor to the MI agencies, to track down both for Queen and Country, or whomever's in charge of Italy. The Pope? I'm not terribly versed in these matters. Agent Fargo, Bartman to his friends, was played by Gordon Scott, who was notable for having been the 11th actor to play Tarzan in 5 movies, before quickly transitioning to meteor roles in Italian sword and sandal epics and action movies, playing similarly iconic characters that also require very little from their portrayer, like Hercules and Zorro. Mr. Scott is basically a non-entity in this movie, simply showing up in scenes, delivering the occasional punch, and leering at the occasional woman, which, to be fair, is his established style, and when you have a fully functioning formula, you don't mess with success. Bartman Fargo goes to Spain and retrieves the Peace Ray, spends at least 10 minutes shooting security cameras, gets the obligatory babe, and lives and lets die another day because diamonds are forever when you're on Her Italian Majesty's Secret Service and you have a very prominent octopussy. I don't have a lot to say about the movie, despite enjoying the riffs a great deal, so let's cut to the episode built around it, which is quite impressive. Experiment 620 was the beginning of Frank Conniff's departure from both the writer's room and Deep 13, being credited from here on out as a script consultant. And TV's Frank gets some of the best host segment material this week, having started his own talent agency, booking Servo a lucrative sneaker sponsorship despite not possessing feet to put in said sneakers, and managing to lose representation for the founders of DreamWorks.
Now that TV's Frank is my agent, the opportunities are limitless.
TV's Frank is an agent?
Sure, he's handling actors, directors, screenwriters.
Screenwriters? Hello, TV's Frank. Come in, my good buddy. Come in, wonderful Frank of mine.
Yeah. Okay, Binky. Thanks a lot, honey. I'll get back to you. Thanks. Talk to me. Oh, hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Steven. Hi, David. Look, I've been thinking this over, and if I'm going to help you with this new project, frankly, I'm going to have to see some resumes. I'm sorry, I don't know what you've done. Goodbye! Yeah.
In segment 3, Servo has constructed his own death ray, which actually looks more impressive than the prop in the movie, that he plans to use on Crow for peaceful purposes.
Servo, no!
What the heck was that for?
Oh boy, I'm sorry. That was my death ray. I had intended it to be for peaceful purposes only, but then you came along and...
I gotta admit, it is pretty funny.
The effect of a burning crow actually worked a little too well during the filming of that particular take, managing to accidentally catch fire at the end of the scene.
Oh my God. Well, I'll be in my trailer.
My favorite segment of the episode features a little fashion show courtesy of Crow, who tries to demonstrate a collection of men's sunglasses inspired by European style, but nobody else is having any of it.
Keep in mind, these work best if you've got a small Italian head. Oh, there's a luscious pair.
Now, those are womany.
Except that they're for men. Yes, this model I call the Brigitte Bardot.
She's French.
Whatever. Mike, the point is these glasses accentuate a man's own special features and maybe help us get to a place, a secret inner manly place that only men can know.
And they're for men.
Of course, who else?
And during the theater segments, Danger Death Ray contains a reference that was used quite frequently on the show whenever a character is depicted running, and that sent me on quite the extensive detour.
Jack LaLanne is the fugitive.
Watermelon Man.
Let's discuss several incarnations of the Fugitive. You may remember from Act 3 of this particular chapter that when discussing Quinn Martin's legendary television career, we deliberately left out one show in particular, The Fugitive, created by Roy Huggins, who's also responsible for such series as The Rockford Files and Maverick, and aired on ABC from 1963 to 1967, introducing a concept that captivated a nation, the saga of Dr. Richard Kimball.
Name? Richard Kimball. Profession? doctor of medicine. Destination, death row, state prison. Richard Kimball has been tried and convicted for the murder of his wife. But laws are made by men, carried out by men, and men are imperfect. Richard Kimball is innocent. Richard Kimball ponders his fate as he looks at the world for the last time and sees only darkness. But in that darkness, fate moves its huge hand.
The Fugitive. A QM production.
Richard Kimball, played by the late great David Jansen, is an innocent convicted murderer and put-upon everyman who spends every episode in a new town under a new identity, trying to make a quiet life doing menial labor until someone somewhere recognizes him or decides to give him hell. In the more important episodes, he doggedly pursues his wife's actual killer, his nemesis, whom he only knows as the One-Armed Man. Kimball is pursued by Lieutenant Philip Gerard, brought to life by another late great, Barry Morse. Although over the course of 120 episodes and 4 seasons, Gerard only appears in the flesh in about a quarter of the episodes, and is instead more of an implied presence that hangs over every crucial decision made by Kimball. The Fugitive was notable for its characterization of Gerard. He was duty-bound to track and arrest our protagonist, but he wasn't a sneering villain or somebody worth jeering. In fact, he frequently cast doubt on whether or not Kimball was even guilty, but still pursued him because it was simply the law, and his job was to enforce that law. We know as audience members that Gerard is pursuing the wrong man, but we are privy to information that he simply does not have.
You think he killed your friend, Priamus?
Sure he killed him. Gus found out who he was, so he killed him.
He's been spotted before. He didn't kill.
What do you mean didn't kill? He killed his wife, didn't he?
The law says he did.
There was a respect shown between opponents that was actually quite unusual for procedurals at the time, and it made the episodes in which Gerard appears more vital and interesting. Unfortunately, though, as I mentioned before, the character doesn't appear in very many episodes. Most hours of the show just hammer home something that the first few episodes made abundantly clear. Richard Kimball is a downtrodden, selfless human being that will turn down an opportunity to help the guest stars of the week initially, but always end up doing the right thing, even if it means potentially losing his freedom. He never truly fails in his mission of the week, because the show would have to change its title to The Guy in Jail, but enough damage is done that his current alias is burnt, and it's time to wander into the next town. In that sense, if you've seen the Incredible Hulk show from the 70s with Bill Bixby, just subtract the giant green rage monster and add an overarching threat. There, you have the formula for The Fugitive. Depending on the hot water Kimball finds himself in, the standalone episodes can be anywhere from old hat to mildly diverting to incredibly tense and claustrophobic. Mostly they feel like padding, and after 4 seasons of changing lives from week to week, you begin to wonder why Kimball hasn't been caught if literally every place he tries to make an anonymous home in blows up in his face. If it isn't circumstance that dooms him, surely the sheer amount of time Gerard has to catch him would factor in, but it doesn't. It's a concept that really works better as a limited series or perhaps a movie, but it wasn't until the 90s that such an interpretation went into production. It was a decade when all the hit television series of the 60s all seemed to have been made into mostly mediocre films, but certainly not all. Like The Brady Bunch, The Beverly Hillbillies, The Avengers, The Addams Family, George of the Jungle, My Favorite Martian, The Jetsons, and of course, Tim Burton's My Mother the Car. 1993 saw the director of Under Siege reunite with Tommy Lee Jones and Han Solo himself, Harrison Ford, for probably the most successful TV adaptation of the era.
I came home, there was a man in my house. He had an artificial arm.
Are you saying that I killed my wife? Are you saying that I crushed her skull and that I shot her?
Right, ladies and gentlemen, listen up. We have a fugitive that's been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground, barring injury, is 4 miles an hour. That will give you a radius of 6 miles. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search. of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or dog house in this area. Your fugitive's name is Dr. Richard Kimball. Go get him.
The Fugitive is not only one of the best action films of the 90s, it's one of the best action films ever made, period. It's tense, remarkably fun, and sharp as a tack. The screenplay takes the basic elements of the television series, but condenses the timeline, updates the procedure, narrows the environment, and creates a product that I find far superior. Part of the success is owed to Harrison Ford, who, during this decade, was still awake for the most part during his performances. He takes Kimball to a different place, partly out of necessity because of the increased urgency of a compressed chronology, and displays the resourcefulness and righteousness previously unseen in the character. Kimball suddenly had new depths, his interactions with other characters frequently highlighting not only his vulnerability, but the life he had before all normalcy was wiped away with his wife's murder. You can see why people would be willing to help him despite the burden he must carry for the length of the film, as well as how he molds the skills of his former life into traits that will help him survive. His opponent Gerard is no longer a mostly passive police detective, but is instead a determined and smooth U.S. Marshal, and as played by Tommy Lee Jones, is more interesting and compassionate than the TV version of the character was ever permitted to be. The one element preserved completely intact from the show is Gerard's increasing hesitance to believe Kimball is guilty, even when he has a job to do, which leads to the moment by which this film will best be remembered.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
In addition to being a tremendous success financially, the film received a nomination for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and Tommy Lee Jones justifiably took home a Best Supporting Actor trophy. But even though the story of Dr. Richard Kimball comes to an end, Warner Brothers, never known to avoid exploiting intellectual property, brought back Gerard for a second go-round 5 years later, and the results? 1998's U.S. Marshals.
Still got one prisoner unaccounted for. Mark Roberts.
A daring escape. A cross-country manhunt. No one had seen anything like it.
I have.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to divide up and search every house, hospital, hotel, back road, and backwater for Mr. Mark J. Roberts.
For Sam Gerard and his team of U.S. Marshals,
You ever make a fugitive arrest before?
Yeah, how about you?
nothing is what it seems.
I got to find out who the hell Mark Roberts really is.
Ex-U.S. Marines Special Forces, ex-CIA Black Ops.
All right, heads up.
No one can be trusted.
I got set up from the word go.
This is a ruthless killer who committed murder in cold blood.
Because this time, the fugitive they're chasing
Give me a hand. I'd like to listen to you explain why your ruthless assassin keeps going out of his way to let people live.
is a government spy who knows too much.
You're the great Sam Gerard.
Yes, I am.
And you always have to win.
Yes, I do.
He's still at large, he's armed, he's dangerous. What do you intend to do?
Catch him.
Before I formally discuss this movie, I want to tell a little personal story. When I was a growing kid and traditional birthday parties were no longer cool, my parents began a tradition of organizing a trip to the movies with my school friends before getting pizza and having a sleepover. They knew that the theater was my church, and they were respectful of that. But they were still ratings hawks. R was unacceptable for the most part. I could sometimes convince my dad to take me to a few. So seeing fun movies with friends was pretty much out of the consideration. March, my birth month, especially in the 90s, wasn't known for A-list releases. The release of Captain Marvel this year on my actual birthday shows how far we've come in terms of how studios put out product today. So when my birthday came around in 1998, I was 12. That meant PG-13 in the best of situations. And that week, there were two major releases, The Big Lebowski and U.S. Marshals. We didn't get to see Lebowski. U.S. Marshals is the perfect example of a why bother cash grab. Do we have the director of The Fugitive? No, but we have the editor of Demolition Man. Do we have Harrison Ford? No, but we have Wesley Snipes and a tranquilized Robert Downey Jr., both figuratively and probably literally. Do we have the source material of The Fugitive? No, but there's plenty to explore in the world of the cop who has to catch him, right? Wrong. The movie begins with Tommy Lee Jones's Gerard in a chicken suit preparing to raid a criminal's residence. Then, after supposedly tense and brief standoff, he gets the upper hand and holds a shotgun to the thug's head.
Hey, Regular or extra crispy?
That's a real movie. Wesley Snipes enters the picture shortly thereafter as a government official masquerading as a civilian whose life is turned upside down when he's accused of murdering another Fed. In a move that can be best described as an attempt at one-upsmanship, instead of a train derailing, a plane crash sets him loose, and it's Gerard's job to get his man and try to figure out if there's a conspiracy going on. It turns out there is, and people on his side might even be involved.
We got one prisoner unaccounted for, Mark Roberts. He's seated in 10D.
I guess the river got him.
No, the river didn't get this guy. He's loose. If you can't find him dead someplace, he's running, folks.
We got a fugitive.
And a sequel! You actually don't find out what the truth behind Snipes' character is until around halfway point, and by that time you're actually rooting for Gerard to catch him so you can go home. But I learned something from the experience. If you're given the choice between watching this or The Big Lebowski, don't make the same decision my parents did. The last episode for this week is MST3K's first, but not last, go-around with a filmmaker who never failed to work on the cheap both financially and intellectually. A man who never found a once prominent actor he couldn't waste. Let's discuss Greydon Clark and Experiment 622, 1979's Angel's Revenge.
7 super sexy women battle the mob's drug ring in an explosion of excitement, passion, and revenge. Their mission, seduce and destroy. Angels Brigade, a fighting force of velvet bodies primed for action. Angels Brigade, they'll blow you away. Angels Brigade, rated PG.
Greydon Clark is best described, like most directors whose work was featured on MST3K, as a schlockmeister. His mentor was fellow Z-grade jack-of-all-trades Al Adamson, whom he worked for as an actor in the late 60s and early 70s, and whose output he seems to have patterned his ensuing filmography as director and producer on. Always diversifying, never hitting the mark. From 1973 to 1998, Greydon was all over the map. From a blaxploitation ripoff of Shampoo, creatively titled Black Shampoo, an almost completely forgotten horror parody called Wacko that I wouldn't believe existed if I didn't find it in all of its grimy glory on Amazon Prime, a sub-trauma sex comedy called Joysticks, rogue cop thriller and future MST fodder Final Justice, and several movies that have recently been tackled by RiffTrax. There's Uninvited, where a mutant cat monster, which is stowed away in the stomach of a house cat, kills people on a white-collar criminal's yacht. Dark Future, where cyborgs takes humans as sex slaves. And my favorite/least favorite, Star Games, which stars Greydon's 2 non-actor sons as mismatched buddies in the midst of an intergalactic conflict. OSHA should retroactively classify that movie's production as child abuse. Greydon has a distinct style in that nothing he shoots is artfully constructed, if it's technically constructed at all, but he makes his days and comes in on budget, so he got to work consistently for 2 decades. Even when he's working with geniuses behind the camera like Dean Cundey, who shot Angel's Revenge the year after Halloween, one of the most exact, efficiently shot films of all time, his movies look washed out and hazy, as if shot on the cheapest film stock possible that also doubled as medical gauze. As I alluded to earlier, many of his movies contain performances from embarrassed-looking one-time stars that clearly needed to pay the rent and seem to have only been hired to add some name recognition to a poster. Joe Don Baker, Mitchell himself, appears in 3 movies, George Kennedy in 2, and Angel's Revenge features numerous slumming character actors. Mr. Magoo himself, Jim Backus, who looks like a melting candle, plays a right-wing drug kingpin. Backus's Gilligan's Island co-star Alan Hale Jr. plays the lead character's agent. Mr. Haney from Green Acres, Pat Buttram, plays a car salesman, and former inadvertent MST participant Jack Palance is a drug pusher and ostensibly the main villain alongside Peter Lawford, who at one time was actually in the Rat Pack, and had to film all of his scenes seated because he was too drunk to stand. I don't think any director has given more dim stars, more sad late career work than Greydon Clark. He's like a reverse Tarantino. If I could do an entire episode on Greydon's quote-unquote contributions to film over the years, I'd be happy. But a summary we'll have to do, because before long it'll start to feel like the Nuremberg trials. Angel's Revenge, or Angel's Brigade on the theatrical poster, was originally titled Seven from Heaven, referring to the 7 be-jumpsuited women who are the main focus of the quote-unquote story, and I'm not really sure when the title changed. I know why the title changed, and that's because Aaron Spelling couldn't trademark the word angel. The movie begins in media res, with the 7 aforementioned angels wearing the aforementioned matching jumpsuits so they don't get confused, and ambushing a drug compound in a large, poorly choreographed action sequence. They're shooting people, blowing up buildings, and risking life and limb and breast. I only point out that last part because breasts are going to come up eventually.
All right, you know what? I'm just giving in and looking at the breasts.
No, don't.
Then the action freeze frames and narration kicks in with the standard hacky, I know what you're wondering what someone like me is doing in a place like this. If you've ever watched television in the last 40 years or so, you've seen this device before. We then flash back to the beginning of the story, but before I get to that, I want to address a theory that I have. If the movie unfolds in a linear fashion, there are no action sequences until the third act, if you discount a scene where a drug dealer runs away from Jack Palance in a residential neighborhood, always remaining only 4 feet ahead of him. And Greydon Clark, for all of his lack of polish or style, is no dummy. He knows that he has to let the viewer know immediately that there will in fact be action eventually, nebulously defined as it is, and instead of waiting, he chose a few choice minutes, bumped them up in chronology, and pasted in a voiceover. All the seams are showing, but I respect the choice. Okay, back to the beginning. 3-time Playboy cover model and, I guess, actress Suzanne Keeger plays Michelle Wilson, an apparently world-renowned singer who headlines a series of shows in Las Vegas playing her smash hit Shine Your Love, which is as inane and trifling as it sounds.
For those of you who can't get tickets to anything else,
stagger in drunk after losing all your money.
That's not Flip Wilson, honey.
Oh, yes, it is. It's that Geraldine character.
He sang with Iggy Pop, you know.
I lost $20,000.
Are we getting funky?
What am I supposed to do? Shine. Okay.
It was a lot easier to entertain in the 70s.
This audience would riot if they saw Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Dig my legs, dig my midriff, yeah.
It's one of Cole Porter's worst songs.
When Michelle's brother is pummeled by some drug dealers, she teams up with school teacher April, played by Greydon Clark's late wife Jacqueline Cole, to take down the empire that funded his assailants. But they will need some women with some serious expertise, like a katana-wielding Kiko, always followed by racist music cues, a cop named Elaine, stuntwoman Terry, and for some reason, a model named Maria. Rounding out the 7 is high schooler Trish, because the only missing aspect was jailbait. The angels use their sexuality and feminine wiles to seduce feeble-minded stooges, working their way up a chain of deplorables.
So why don't you bring your friend over here, and we'll all have some fun in the fog.
We'll provide you with sex, which is something that men like.
Listen, I just can't right now.
This kind of sexualized empowerment/pandering was nailed perfectly in 2017 when Bridget Nelson and Mary Jo Pehl tackled the uncut version of the movie for RiffTrax, adding a button to all the scenes that end with wacky slapstick and lots of giggling.
Let's go try on hats!
The Angels also acquire an A-Team action van and hold a pusher hostage, threatening to amputate his penis. It all leads to a scene played at the start of the movie where the Angels charge the drug compound and take down all the bad guys. But it's not over, because the compound was merely the Darth Vader to Peter Lawford's sinister Emperor. Like the Emperor, Lawford also spends most of his time seated in a chair, although I don't believe the Emperor was on the sauce. They head to Lawford's estate, which probably belongs to one of Greydon Clark's friends, and have a short confrontation that ends with Lawford being shot and floating lifelessly in his pool. Cleavage is bared, bad guys are punched and kicked with cartoon sound effects, and jumpsuits are sported, and they all lived happily ever after. The movie's tone alternates between infantile sex farce and full-on Cinemax softcore TV movie with all the good parts cut out. During every scene, it feels like any character, including the has-been cameos, could start disrobing and having sex with their co-star right where they're standing, but always stopping right before the penetration. Mike and the bots pick up on this strange vibe, providing another example of what I have described as MST3K After Dark. It's surprisingly edgy, even for Season 6, and it's never more evident than when a hillbilly approaches an outhouse with what looks like a girly mag.
Wish I hadn't bought a Playgirl. Aw, heck, they're nude anyway. You know, beer and porn do make the shift go faster.
No matter how many times I watch the episode, that frankness never fails to delight me. The writers took every opportunity offered to say what they usually merely alluded to.
It's not gonna work. Why? Well, first of all, take off the brass knuckles. You don't look like you've been hurt. Here, try this. Lipstick? Oh, well, okay.
I have a feeling Johnny Watt is going to be in this.
Lips here like a fruit.
This movie is a shrine for 7th grade boys.
Do that!
I bet the phrase, "Where's my cocaine?" was heard a lot in this film.
They also pick up on the movie's suspicious similarity to one of the true pop culture phenomenons of the decade.
War on drugs was never sexier.
Girls, we've got company.
Get out the good linen.
They're gonna get our little surprise.
Oh, I just speed dialed my manicurist.
Jeez, it was just the Johnson family going to mass.
Oh, now how will the kids get to band practice? Would you boys?
Let's go back to 1976 and discuss the legacy of Charlie's Angels.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little girls who went to the police academy. And they were each assigned very hazardous duties. But I took them away from all that, and now they work for me. My name is Charlie.
You know the story. Every week, 3 pretty detectives get an assignment from a male voiceover on a speakerphone that involves them going undercover to solve some mundane yet slightly sexy mystery and looking damn good in the process. They are aided by a comic relief sidekick named Bosley, played by Grandpa from Rugrats. The case is solved, there's a freeze frame, roll credits. Charlie's Angels is certainly some routine, mediocre television, but it kicked off a wave of sex-obsessed quote-unquote jiggle programming, which took a boilerplate format and added revealing outfits or some obligatory sex. The creators and actors responsible maintain that they were making a feminist product, and in some sense, I guess that assessment is correct. The lead women get the shit done on their own without the aid of men, Bosley is completely useless, and they look good doing it. But their boss, Charlie, is terribly patronizing and a total corny, horny poonhound.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, that's it until next time. Now I'd better get back to the job at hand.
What's that, Charlie?
Same old thing. Burning the midnight oil, bearing down on our next case. And believe me, it's a real scorcher.
Here you are, Charlie.
Bless you, my dear.
He's basically Joss Whedon's personal life manifested as the owner of a detective agency. The show lasted for 5 seasons, cycling through angels throughout the run, usually introducing and or dropping one each year. Farrah Fawcett was obviously the most popular, somewhat due in part to her legendary revealing poster that debuted the same year as the series and sold over 20 million copies, but Jaclyn Smith has a fashion line for Kmart, and Kate Jackson has won 3 Emmys, so I'd say that they all came out even. Oh, and Tanya Roberts was in Beastmaster. There's that. While I can't say I care one iota for the show, I do have some esteem for something it inspired a little less than 30 years later.
Meet the most elite crime-fighting force ever assembled. They've got techniques you never dreamed of.
You know, I signed that release waiver, so you can just feel free to stick things in my slot.
Good morning, angels.
Good morning, Charlie.
Columbia Pictures presents Cameron Diaz.
I'm like a virgin, you know? I mean, it's my first time. Here.
Drew Barrymore.
I figured we could have a little breakfast.
I have to go.
Lucy Liu.
At your service.
And Bill Murray.
I love fire.
Charlie's Angels.
Drew Barrymore worked for years developing a cinematic reboot of the franchise for a good part of the 90s and eventually succeeded in 2000, in addition to starring with Cameron Diaz and Lucy Liu as the titular Angels, no pun intended. Co-written by John August, which I believe is Hollywood law, and helmed by music video director Mick G, the movie was a candy-colored surprise success layered with needle-drop pop hits, and it inspired a sequel 3 years later that was everything the first offered, only more overbearing. The concept was now more self-aware, gratuitous, and visually dazzling, and if there was a film trend during production, it found its way into the finished movie. Bullet time, wire foo, ironic montages, meta jokes that don't wink so much as shake you into submission, etc. It's pure cotton candy cinema without artistic merit, but it moves at a breathless clip and smashes so much in your face in only 98 minutes that I can only smile and nod appreciatively. And it's certainly more empowering and competent than the original series. It's also likely that the DVD taught millions of teenage boys, and invariably girls too, how to masturbate. I speak from experience. Because I know people who did. I'm not talking about myself. That would be far too revealing and ugly to picture. Unless it's totally cool, right? Right? I'm asking for a friend.
You were the cop? I was the beaver. Oh my God, what are the chances that we're both school mascots?
The episode for Angel's Revenge is absolutely packed to the gills, which is partially attributable to the abundance of additional writers, one of which was future Crow Bill Corbett, but also due to the staggering amount of material to work with. The first segment is a meta jab at Comedy Central and MST3K's dwindling ratings as Forrester tries to boost the show's viewer share with a food additive that turns the Satellite of Love gang into the cast of Renegade, which was a stunningly popular syndicated show of the era. This includes a reference to the failed Jim Carrey sitcom The Duck Factory, which I remember being a staple of Comedy Central's lineup at the time.
It's wearing off. The ratings are slipping. Did I just turn into your wily Winnebago driving Native American buddy and then back again? Oh, okay. This is not a problem. Us being 70s relief pitchers is worth at least a full ratings point. Show him your Tug McGraw again, Frank.
I'm Tug McGraw.
In segment 2, Crow takes advantage of the movie's 1970s setting by writing a blaxploitation screenplay called Chocolate Jones and the Temple of Funk. As is appropriate, everyone has an afro wig except for Mike, who's dressed as Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch. Oh, and Gypsy's fro looks more like Samuel L. Jackson's Jules Winfield Jerry curl from Pulp Fiction.
Okay, everybody. In the spirit of the 70s, I've come up with a brilliant blaxploitation film for all of us to star in.
Crow, I don't know, it just seems to me that you've reworked Earth vs. Soup and inserted jivey character names.
Oh, like I'm that lazy.
Now, I'm confused. Am I Chocolate Jones or Sugarfly McQueen?
You're both. And you're also reading the part of Sweet Mama Stringbean, who runs the Boutique de Boutte. Okay, Mike. Let's see. Take it from Afros and Bafros line on the top of page 5.
Okay, girl, don't think on Soul Brothers.
I don't have any lines.
Well, but you get to wear slinky dresses and hold guns and stuff.
Not this, sister.
The final segment involves the bot's new invention inspired by the various embarrassing cameos in the movie, the shamometer.
But now, thanks to my fantastic new invention, mankind are able to measure exactly how shameful they was.
Well, this little thing, the shame-o-meter?
Shamometer, Mike.
Hey, shamometer. Bop-dee-ba-dee-bee.
How charming.
Shamometer.
Shut up, Crow. Mike, shame emits tiny waves best measured in units of lawfords, kilolawfords, megalawfords, and so on. Cambot, if you please.
Well, howdy, girl. Shall I gasoline her up for you?
See there?
Well,
Mid-Migaloford
mercy,
range. I'd say that's pretty
mercy,
shameful.
says
But let's try something else. Cambutt?
I am Commander Lindsay Marsh, commander of the American
See there? Jim Backus level shame registers well into the Gigaloford range. So in order to get an accurate reading, I'm going to have to retrofit this little baby.
No, that's...
And that is where we end this act of the Coolness Chronicles. Next time we'll debate the science of invisibility, witness the eternal struggle between the undead and Mexican wrestlers, salute the night when the stars salute themselves, and say a bittersweet goodbye to the floppiest second banana on television. All that and much, much more as we continue to chart the history and legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But before we sign off for the week, I'd like to introduce my favorite segment of the first half of the season of the podcast, when you, the listener, share with me the movies you love. It's time for Random Recommendations. This week's recommendation comes from Rebecca Little Blair. It's Adam Resnick's critically and commercially disastrous 1994 cult classic, Cabin Boy.
Touchstone Pictures presents...
Here's how a harem girl dances. Okay, well, thank you for that. Whatever that was.
Cabin Boy.
They'll come in.
It's the story of a boy and his love affair with the sea.
This moron got on the wrong boat.
He never dreamed where the winds of fortune would blow him. Where the spirit of adventure would hurl him. Or where the hands of fate...
Come on over here, honey.
...would grab him.
These pipes are clean!
Touchstone Pictures presents...
What happened to you?
Well, let's just say I've finally shed my feminine side.
Chris Elliott.
So this is what you guys do for fun? Humiliate an imbecile?
Cabin Boy.
Thank you, fellow crewmates. I'm off. And when I return, I shall be a cabin man.
Rated PG-13. Now playing at a theater near you.
Resnick, along with star Chris Elliott, were responsible for the short-lived but beloved sitcom Get a Life, which might be the best thing to air on network television in the early 90s after The Simpsons. Tim Burton, a fan of the show, asked Resnick and Elliott to write a script for him to direct, so they came up with a concept that was equal parts Captain's Courageous and Ray Harryhausen. Burton dropped out suddenly and suggested that Resnick directed instead, even though he had no real passion for the material nor the desire to become a director. As a result, the film is occasionally cheap and not particularly visually dazzling, but there's a lightweight charm to the proceedings, and it has an indescribable oddball energy that really works in the film's favor. It boasts a great cast, including Elliott, Brian Doyle Murray, James Gammon, Andy Richter, a young Melora Walters imbued with the spirit of Marion Ravenwood, Alfred Molina, Mike Starr, the legendary Bob Elliott, Ann Magnuson, and one of my favorite actors, Russ Tamblyn, as Chalky, the half-man, half-shark.
Goodbye, sweet Chalky. I shan't forget you. Half man, half shark equals one complete gentleman.
But Cabin Boy is probably best remembered for a cameo from David Letterman in his film debut, and only one of two roles in which he didn't play himself, the second being Beavis and Butthead Do America, as he plays the dumbass's possible father. Especially since Letterman took the film's poor reception as an opportunity to turn it into a recurring punchline on Late Night.
You, old man. Look, I am in desperate need of assistance.
Well, what's on your mind, little girl?
I realize that you are most likely the product of lower-class inbreeding, but perhaps you could help me.
Oh, gosh, I certainly hope so.
I have been wandering this dreary village in hopes of finding the Queen Catherine. You wouldn't have any idea where she might be docked, would you?
You know what you are? You're one of those little, fancy lads, aren't you? Boy, you're cute. Okay. Gosh, what a sweet little outfit. Is it your little spring outfit? You couldn't be cuter. You're so adorable. Oh, my. You know, you remind me of my niece, Sally. Lovely girl. She's a dietitian. Hey, would you like to buy a monkey?
No, I don't want to buy a monkey.
Are you sure?
No, I'm on my way. Your family must be very proud of you.
All right, we'll see you, honey. Hey, wait a minute. Jennifer, come here.
What?
Come here. I can show you to that ship of yours.
You will?
Right down this road. Right there.
Marvelous. Well, I probably should hurry, shouldn't I? Because they're going to start the banquet soon. And I must tell you, I'm famished.
Well, why wouldn't you be? Big girls have big appetites, don't they?
For fans of the film, the Kino Lorber Blu-ray is essential viewing. It contains a lengthy interview with Resnick and Elliott, in which they detail the brief pre-production process involving Tim Burton's downgrading position from director to producer, the stressful shoot, the test screenings that involved walkouts, the theatrical run, which was savaged by critics, and the post-release period that found Resnick and Elliott unable to get work for years. Resnick in particular minces nary a word, and paints a picture of regret and despair that really makes you feel for the poor guy.
It was very mixed feelings. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm directing a movie, and Chris now went from having Tim Burton directing him to me, his buddy, which is nice. We're buddies, but it'd be better if it was Tim Burton, you know. And and
I never thought that, kid.
Oh, he's
until the movie
sweet
came
as sugar.
out.
He's sweet as sugar until the movie came out, and we were told, you know, basically by everyone, and that, you know, this was the worst piece of shit that had ever been made. You know, this little fucking movie.
I think that was what my mom said.
Did she say? Yeah, my parents would like. Although I did find a scrapbook recently that my mom had kept. I didn't know of various things that I had done, and Cabin Boy, it was just like a bunch of bad reviews. I remember thinking, did she read them? Like, why do I want to be reminded?
And why would she keep them?
Keep these things that, like, say, you know, these
no,
headlines.
My dad did that too.
Cabin Boy sinks. Every headline was like,
she
you know.
was just proud that your name was mentioned.
Yeah, I guess that's odd. Yes, I don't know.
The audio commentary, also featuring the interviewees, goes even deeper into the misery, with Resnick repeatedly refusing to accept even the most reasonable compliment of the film by the track's moderator. Rough stuff, but incredibly valuable, and a great movie. Thank you to everyone involved in making MST3K for everything that they've contributed to my life and culture as a whole. Double thanks for writing the episode guide that I will quote frequently in this season of the pod. I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. If you want to support the artists who made this wonderful show, many episodes are available on VOD at RiffTrax.com. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source. Share it with anyone you can, any way you can. This has been the largest and most fulfilling endeavor I've ever seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Have questions, comments, or random recommendations, or is there anything I missed in this particular chapter? Contact me on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan or on our Facebook page, and keep on the lookout for updates. Until next week, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always...
They're eating her! And then they're going to eat me! Oh my
The Coolness Chronicles is written, produced, and edited by Ryan Rodriguez. Executive producers are Tracy Rodriguez and Luis Rodriguez. Original music by Bildschirm. Please visit bildschirm.bandcamp.com for more information.